What's up, rejects? Kaifus here with another guide for you today. We're going to be looking at the Zealot class for the first time on this channel, and we're going to be looking at a controversial build, the Loner Knife Stealth Zealot. You've all seen these in your games where they run ahead and die, and maybe it's been really frustrating for you, but it is an incredibly fun build and is extremely useful to your team if you play it right. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. And please like and subscribe for more Darktide content. First off, what is this build good at? Well, it's good at being very fast, doing high amounts of damage, and being very versatile. We can be very useful to our team despite taking a rather selfish talent tree, which I'll show you here in just a minute. But yeah, what this build does great is things like picking up your teammates, doing the interrogators while you're invisible, buying time for your team. We do take a lot of talents that make us rather tanky, so we can play that front line role despite taking Shroud Field and going invisible. It's also great at dealing with big single targets, like if there's a mutant coming towards your team, you can easily go invisible and stab it once and kill it. But this build does have a bit of a bad reputation, and honestly it's for pretty good reason. For some reason, players like to run this build in kind of a speed run style. You are extremely fast, probably the fastest in the game, and a lot of players tend to think that speed makes them invincible, or something like that. I'm not really sure, but don't run ahead of your team and die. We don't want to be one of those zealots. So even though our kit is pretty selfish, we're taking a talent that gives us coherency even when we don't have teammates near us. We're basically just bringing damage as far as our utility goes, but you know, like I said earlier, we have a few tools to help out our team when they're in trouble, namely being able to pick up down teammates extremely easily, having a ridiculously low cooldown on our ultimate, and being able to do things like you can see here where I can do the interrogation without risking myself. I can just go invisible and do it right away. So let's get into the talents and talk about why this build works. So this is the talent tree we'll be using today. As always, feel free to pause and copy it if you'd like. I'm also going to be leaving a link to the Games Lantern version of the build in the description below, so feel free to go check it out on there. Their website is great. I use it a lot when I'm making these videos. Makes it a lot easier to do. But to get into the tree, the main things that we're going to be relying on to make this work, and the core synergy of the build, is going to be using Shroud Field with Blazing Piety, Fury Rising, and Righteous Warrior. We're going to be pairing these with Invocation of Death to help give us ability cooldown reduction on critical hits. All this put together means that we're going to be able to go invisible a lot. Whenever we have a problem, especially if we're in melee, we can always go invisible to drop aggro off of ourselves, or to run after an errant bomber, or to pick up a teammate, do an objective. Really, the utility out of invisibility, especially invisibility for 6 seconds with improved Shroud Field, is just, it's hard to overstate how impactful it is in these games. You're not trying to dump aggro onto your team too often. You don't want to just dump a bunch of ragers onto your team when they're not ready for it. But if you see a big group coming, or you are getting hit, you're getting cornered, it's always a good get out of jail free card. But we do need to be responsible and understand that whenever we use our ultimate, which we will be doing a lot because of those synergies, we are dumping aggro onto our team. So we need to be aware of that and prepare to help them in that case. So, you know, if we're surrounded by a horde, or, you know, there's a bunch of crushers coming at us and we're not in a good position to deal with it, go invisible, protect yourself, but get ready to help out your team because they're going to need it. So now that we've covered the basic synergies that make this build work, let's talk about how we keep ourselves from dying and what gives us our ridiculous damage. So for defense, we're going to be using Second Wind, Thy Wrath Be Swift, Good Balance, Endearing Faith, and my favorite named talent in the Zealot tree, the Voice of Terra. Each of these kind of fills a different niche of defense. Some of them give us toughness damage resistance when we dodge. Some give us actual toughness when we dodge. Some give us toughness regen on our ranged attack kills, which is very useful if you find yourself stuck up against a bunch of gunners. But the main one I want to focus on here is Thy Wrath Be Swift, because there's a little bit of an interaction here I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and I only became aware of it due to a Reddit post. But I wanted to share that with y'all. So what this talent does is it makes you go a little bit faster, 15% extra move speed whenever you take a hit, But more importantly, you cannot be stunned by enemy attacks. Now, this is a nice little talent to have in melee, but where it really shines is when you're going up against a big group of gunners. Because now, whenever a Dreg gunner or a Scab gunner is shooting at you with their little machine gun, you're not going to get staggered. You'll actually just be able to run straight at them. I'm not sure if this is an intended interaction or not, but the way the talent is worded, it does say enemy attacks can no longer stun you, so I imagine it is intentional. But yeah, it does help a lot whenever you're charging a big line of gunners and you need to get up close and personal real fast. So I definitely recommend this talent above pretty much all the others, but I do like taking things like Second Wind, Good Balance, Enduring Faith because they do make you substantially tankier. With how often we're critting and dodging in this build, these talents are going to be up for most of the game, so you're going to feel it. You will be durable. Now let's shift over to offense. So for offense, to make ourselves the DPS machine, the boss-killing aficionado, the rampaging death cult assassin for the Emperor, these are the talents we're going to be using. First off is Scourge for bleed stacks on critical hits and increasing our critical strike chance. Ambuscade, I hope I'm saying that right. I don't actually know that word. This one gives us extra range damage when we're shooting things in the back, which is going to synergize really nicely with our ranged weapon. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Anoint in Blood and Purge the Unclean. All these just give us pretty generic damage boosts. They are just very useful, but the main one to draw attention to is Scourge. Scourge, what it does is it gives you bleed stacks on critical hits. Well, we're critically hitting a lot. That's fantastic. But when you get up to 3 stacks of bleed, like after 3 crits or just 3 bleed stacks, you're going to have an extra 30% chance to crit. So with our 5% base, it might be a little bit more. I'm not a Zealot main. I'm sorry if it's wrong. But with our 5% base, 25% from Blazing Piety, 30% from Scourge, and 5% from a perk on our weapon, we find ourselves at 65% chance to crit with an extremely fast weapon. So we're critting all the time. Each of those crits is giving us toughness damage reduction. They're each giving us bleed stacks. They're giving us cooldown reduction on our Shroud field. It's just the synergy is beautiful, and it's the main reason why this build works so well. And while you can put in different weapons other than the knife, I wouldn't really recommend it because the knife just does it better. It's hard to find a good replacement for it. But with that said, I think it's about time we hop into the weapons, so let's get to that. For our melee weapon, we're going to be using the Catachan Mark III Combat Knife. This thing is amazing, it synergizes fantastically with our kit, and honestly it's what we built this build around. So one thing I really like about it is its heavy attack and push block attack. The strike down pattern of the heavy attacks is great into really anything. It's very easy to hit weak spots with, and it synergizes really nicely with the push block attack. So what you can do is go heavy attack into push block attack into another heavy attack. And that happens very, very fast, so it pulls out damage very quickly. For our perks, we're going to be using 5% crit and 25% flak armor. Flak armor is the most common armor type in the game, so it's very useful to have. I don't think that we need maniac damage on this because most of the maniacs we're going to be dealing with are ranged weapon, and realistically the only enemy that you're going to be benefiting from with maniac damage is mutants and ragers. You'll already kill every other maniac in one headshot with the knife, so I don't think it's super necessary. For our blessings, this is one of those things that I really think is good for new players. There's a lot of variety that we can use for our blessings. So if you're not a nerdy commissar like me and you haven't grinded all the blessings, it can be really useful to have that variety. The first one I'll mention is the one I like the most, and that's Lacerate and Uncanny Strike. Now hang on, I know some of you zealots out there are going to be calling me a heretic for using Lacerate. Like, oh, you should just hit him in the head. I know, but with realistically, the amount of times you're swinging your knife, you're going to be hitting stuff in the body all the time. It's really unavoidable. So that means we're going to be stacking up Scourge very, very quickly and getting that full crit bonus and the added benefit of the bleed. Now, Uncanny Strike helps fix a problem with the build, and that's that it does not deal very well with Carapace armor. Sure, you can stab Crusher to death, but it will take time if you don't have any form of rending in the build. Either that, or you're going to need to rely on your ranged weapon to cover that weakness. So Uncanny Strike, getting that stacking rending on weak spot hits, really helps shore up that weakness in the build. Another good option is Riposte plus Ruthless Backstab. Riposte gives you 20% crit for 6 seconds on a successful dodge. This means that we're going to be up to 80% of crit if we have all of our buffs active at the same time. 80% crit means a lower cooldown on Shroud Field, and yeah, you're just going to be able to go invisible a lot more often. Ruthless Backstab giving you 100% rending on backstab hits is going to mean that you're just murdering whatever you hit in the back, and you have a lower cooldown on Shroud Field because of the increased crit chance. The last one I want to talk about is Lacerate and Mercy Killer. This is probably the most generic combination. The synergy is pretty obvious. Mercy Killer gives you extra damage to weak spot when you hit bleed. Lacerate gives you bleed stacks when you hit things in the body. So you go slash slash to the body, stab to the head, does a whole bunch of damage. I don't like it as much as the others just because I don't feel like it has a good way to deal with Carapace armor. Even with the added weak spot damage, it's going to be pretty difficult to make that work. So you're going to really struggle against Crushers specifically. Maulers might also give you a bit of an issue. But that's not to say it's not a good way to run the knife. If this is what you have, I can give it the Kyphus seal of approval. For a ranged weapon, we're going to be using the Columbus Mark V Infantry Autogun. I've talked about this weapon a lot on my channel, so we're going to keep it a little bit brief here. For the perks, you're going to be taking Maniac and Flak damage, and for the blessings, you're going to be taking Dum Dum and Raking Fire. If you have to prioritize these, prioritize the perks over the blessings. The perks really are what make the weapon work the way it's supposed to in this build. But if you have access to Raking Fire, this is going to give you a ton of extra damage. You're going to be able to easily stealth up behind big groups of enemies and just mow them down. Even Maulers will fall very, very quickly to this setup. Dum Dum is just extra damage. If you don't have access to it, that's totally fine. Just run whatever you have. Just make sure you prioritize those perks. We do have a few other options for ranged weapons, but what we're mostly looking for is a ranged weapon that can deal with ranged enemies for those times where running ahead to knife them would put us too far away from our team. It needs a quick draw time and good crit synergies. If it has all three of these properties, you can run it without any issue. So if one of your favorite guns fits this, feel free. My recommendations are the Cantrell Shotgun with Man Ripper and Staggering Force, I think it's called. It's plus damage on stagger. I'll post it up right here. This is great for dealing with hordes. When you crit with Man Ripper, it will go through the entire horde and kill pretty much all of it. It's very satisfying to see giblets fly everywhere when you fire it into a crowd. The only downside is it really requires Man Ripper. If you don't have Man Ripper, the gun just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Another good option is the Cantrell and Akatran Las pistols with Raking Fire and Infernus for the blessings. For the perks, you can really kind of run what you want, but I would definitely recommend you put Maniac at least as one of them. Extra crit is also going to be good for obvious reasons. This is a good long-range option that also deals good damage to bosses when you're stacking Infernus with your bleed stacks. It is ammo hungry, but you should really be using your ranged weapon pretty sparingly in this build anyway. You can also, it's very good since it has access to Raking Fire as one of the blessings. It's very good for doing the whole stealth up behind them and, you know, mow them down thing. I don't really have a preference over either variant. The Cantrell hits a lot harder, it shoots a little slower, and it has a little bit more recoil. The Akatran shoots faster, does less damage, but also has basically no recoil, so really it's just down to whatever you prefer. The last option I'll mention is the Zerona Stub Revolver. I've also talked about this weapon a lot on my channel, so I'll keep it brief. Basically, you're going to want to have Carapace damage as one of your perks, and you're also going to have Maniac damage. For the blessings, you're going to take Surgical with Hand Cannon, and this is going to kind of fill that gap of dealing with Maulers and Crushers. The Zerona is great at this, it excels at it, and it's also very good, you know, because it's got a quick draw time, it can kill specialists very quickly. It's just an overall great weapon, so if you want to use it, feel free. Next up, we'll talk about the curios briefly. For my setup, I like to run 1 stamina, 1 health, and 1 toughness curio. I find that this is a very good all-around setup that'll help you survive a lot of situations. I do know a lot of zealots like to take additional stamina curios. I don't feel like it's strictly necessary, but if you prefer that, feel free. I would just make sure to take at least 1 toughness curio, because it synergizes with a lot of our other talents. But yeah, for the perks on the curios, I like to run toughness regen, ability cooldown, and stamina regen. I feel like running stamina regen on all three really helps offset not taking additional stamina curios, so that's why I do it. For the other two perks, toughness regen and ability cooldown reduction are always going to be good. They're not situational at all, so you can go with those. I don't think it's really necessary to take any kind of damage resistance or damage resistance against gunners, which is something I like to take a lot in my builds, because you're so fast and you're able to dodge so easily. I just don't feel like it's really necessary. Lastly, I just want to show you all a quick tip about how to deal with hordes. So dealing with hordes with a knife is something that takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it down, you can really just wreck them. So as you can see here, what we're going to be doing is using 2 light attacks, or 2 or 3, doesn't really matter, into push block attacks. For some reason, the push block attack on the Mark III combat knife has an absurd amount of cleave on it, and this really helps you just wade through hordes. As you can see here, I'm able to kill them even with a lone rager in the background. But yeah, being able to kind of master this combination specifically is going to help you a lot and save you a lot of headaches. I can't tell you how many times when I was learning how to play Zealot that I would get stuck trying to kill a bunch of Poxwalkers while my team died around me. So yeah, I hope this tip helps you out in your games. With that, I want to thank everybody for watching. If you've made it all the way to the end, know that you have the sincerest thanks from the bottom of my cold Commissar heart. I've got a little bit more content coming out for y'all, hopefully before Christmas. I'm trying to aim to get this out by Christmas. But the next video is going to be a detailed veteran guide, just a general guide aimed at newer players and people looking to break into Damnation who haven't been in Damnation yet. It's my firm belief that everyone can run Damnation, especially base Damnation. Once you understand how it works, you understand how to build your weapons and use your talents. So once you get into Damnation, you're able to farm up that plasteel, get those credits, and all that good stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Now go out there and kill some heretics. Kaifus, out.